Meanwhile, you got a subset of society that, they want to like play video games, or they use that same access to information as a source of entertainment. And it's probably more than 50% of the population. It's most people, instead of utilizing the unimaginable amounts of knowledge and wisdom that are available to, for almost no money, for free or close to free, they want to play a video game instead.
If you love video games, then play video games until you can make money doing it. If you like watching TV, well, learn how to, analyze and critique a show so that you can become a critic of film or something. Like whatever that passion is, take it to a level where you can actually monetize it.
If you don't have $1 million yet, you're living a much lesser life than what could be easily available to you with the right guidance. My head coach has freed up a few spots in his calendar to hold one-on-one strategy calls with the highest quality applicants. If you're doing well already and you're looking to accelerate your momentum and do even better, click the link in the description now and apply for your strategy session. More at the end of this video.
Today I'm chatting with Mr. Rich Franklin. Rich was a UFC fighter for, how many years were you over there? A long time.
Almost 10 full years, like 9.5 years was my career.
3-time champion.
185, yeah.
Hall of Fame.
Initially, I didn't think they were going to put me in.
I was at DC's fight, or DC's, I was at the fights recently when Daniel Cormier they announced that, and we were 30 feet away from each other when they made that announcement, and he looked all excited. But he just retired, 2 years ago.
Yeah, he got it. Apparently, he was good enough to get inducted in the Hall of Fame before he retired. They had to think extensively about my induction.
You had an amazing record. You are one of the OG guys that everybody respected. You did amazing and well educated, likable, speak well, and beat up some of the toughest guys of your ever. I was gonna say of your generation, but ever.
Beat up some of the toughest guys. I got beat up by a couple of the toughest guys too.
Part of the job, I think. Yeah.
It is. It comes with the territory. You're not going to win everything in life. It's that simple.
A conversation I've had with a couple other pro fighters is about the evolution of martial arts over time and how dramatic that's been in the last say 3 decades. Or from early days UFC. There's an extraordinary bravery. Say the early was that 1993. That a guy gets in a ring with people that, you don't have the internet that you can be reviewing tapes and looking at other styles. You don't have, you have limited knowledge. You have people from around the world with different styles, different techniques, different knowledge base. That wasn't, so widely shared as it is today, where you have, BJJ fanatics or whatever else, that everything is there from the top guys in the world that, all the instructionals. So, and then, just other, countless hours of tape from fights and so on. Absolutely. So there's a real bravery, even at the time that you'd be entering, or even when your career would have started, that the original fights, what were the rules? It's like no eye gouging and no biting. I think those are the only rules.
Maybe no fish hooking. Couldn't fish hook the cheek, maybe.
You could punch somebody in the groin, you could pull their hair, you could do a lot of things.
There was I don't know if you remember was it Guy Metzger? I can't remember who he fought. And he had long hair, and his opponent wove his hand into his hair and just didn't let go of it the entire fight.
Wow.
And then his next fight after that, guy came out with a short haircut.
Changed his hairstyle.
Perhaps a little bit more like this one.
Changed his hairstyle. What are your thoughts about the evolution of that sport, going from the early Hoist Gracie championships and the early fights, where you're fighting 4 times in a night with almost no rules? The skill set is, leaps and bounds. The skill set you have today is more than anybody would have had in that time, in that generation.
Anytime I talk about this, my brain always kind of goes back to Bruce Lee's comments, like with his system of Jeet Kune Do, about using what works and eliminating what doesn't. And that was his big talk in the day, like not being confined to some sort of just traditional art and what it offers. And when you look at some of his old movies, like you can see fight scenes where he's doing arm bars, for example. And this is the 1960s, and nobody even knew what that stuff was at that point in time. And so to think about that and whether or not he was actually effective in combat, because from a grappling standpoint or not is a completely different debate, because we don't have anything like that on film to analyze. But the fact that he was thinking about these kinds of things and these concepts just goes to show a lot. And then, I don't know, it seems like just history forgot about that, or there was no evolution with that, because you maintain this whole traditional martial art mindset all through the 80s and 90s, and with all the action films and everything, it's centered around that kind of stuff. And I can remember myself sitting there in 93 watching the first UFC, and when Hoist was on the ground, like everybody else that was watching that at the time, and I'd started in traditional karate as well, and I was come on, just stand up. That was my reaction. Like, come on, just stand. Just if I was there, if I was fighting, I would just stand up. And then I watched the second UFC, and I saw Hoist doing the same thing to his competition, and something in my head clicked. Like, you know what? You need to learn how to fight on the ground, because there's a good chance that the fight is going to end up on the ground. I don't understand why martial arts didn't evolve in that, I'll call them dark ages, where it's just pretty much like Bruce came on and you see these techniques, and then there's just this stagnant level of martial art. There's no level up during that time until the early to mid 90s, and then suddenly that actually in combat, not in a movie, is what changed it for everybody. And so, from there, I think the beautiful thing initially about MMA in the U.S. is that it was pitted as like one martial art versus another martial art to show what was the most effective. And you see some of these initial guys. I think like a guy like Ken Shamrock as a shoot fighter was probably one of the first of that initial generation. Like G1 MMA fighters was probably the first mixed martial artist as a shoot fighter. He was incorporating a lot of those. But what you saw initially was like initially there was like this domination of the jiu-jitsu guys, and then the wrestlers figured out how to defend the submissions, and because they could control whether the fight was standing or on the ground, then there was this period of like domination of wrestlers with guys like a Matt Hughes or something like that. And so you saw these initial periods of time before things started to settle out, and I think it was about the time I got in the UFC where you really saw that initial wave of true mixed martial artists. Like I was like that one of the guys who was regarded to as the first true mixed martial. I wasn't, just a jiu-jitsu guy or just a stand-up guy or whatever. And so, and then, since then, I think that from that point on, it's just now it's kind of remained the same, and it just levels up, because the resources are there. And you see, I didn't get started in this sport until truly into MMA probably until I was already competing professionally. But now you have these kids that have resources like me at the age of 7, and they're already being exposed to these concepts of mixing, blending everything together. So you just see that leveling up with different as time passes.
You told me once that back in the day that you'd have some VHS tapes that you'd pause and review kind of frame by frame what was going on.
Definitely time marking me here, yeah, because this was prior to, heck, I don't know how many of the listeners would, there's probably a percentage of your listeners here that have never even seen a VHS tape before in their life. But before everything was digital and before we had DVDs and we had those VHS cassettes, and you remember the resolution quality on those things weren't amazing, but I can remember watching old fights or even instructional tapes at that time, and you would watch these tapes and you had the ability to pause a VHS tape, and then with your VCR, you would hit the fast forward button and it would frame by frame. And that's initially because we didn't have the resources, particularly in Ohio. There wasn't the resources of many Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts. So you're watching these moves on tape, frame by frame, like, okay, the arm goes over that way, and then you're pressuring here in the shoulder, and then you would go into the gym and replicate it. And that's how I learned Jiu-Jitsu the first probably 5 years of my BJJ training life.
It's a different world.
Yeah.
The resources available from the internet in general. It's a puzzle to me the same way when I think about money. I think about financial markets. Say, imagine being having hundreds of millions of dollars, and you got to go physically procure the Wall Street Journal and look at some stale quotes, and these are accepted business practices, in our lifetime, in the years that we've been alive. And versus, I pull out my phone today and it tells me, maybe they're 1 second old or something, tells me what the spot price is for all the resources of the world. And a person has more information on their phone today than JP Morgan, like the man J.P. Morgan could never have dreamed to have access to information that you have today.
Yeah.
And you can look at that two ways. You can say, well, your competition has access to that too. But if you don't know what to do with it, everybody in the world, nearly 8 billion people, they got access to the same information that that Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt has. But how many of them are implementing it? How many of them really have that skill set? And I would say the same thing about finance, that you could have the information, but if you don't know what to do with it, you're likely to make no decision or a poor decision. It's still not useful to you. So, but for the few people that do know how to analyze something, if you know how to look at an instructional video and be like, oh, I have to move the arm here, shift the arm here, balance my weight like this, get my leg over, And man, that's amazing information to have. It's extraordinary resource if you know what to do with it.
I think the access to information in the modern world, what it does is, like a normal distribution curve, right? You have your bottom percentage of people that are just going to fade away because the people that actually know how to or have the desire to utilize that information, right? It's at your fingertips. Whereas before, going back to the example I gave about accessing stuff on VHS tape, like the film to study opponents or to figure out different jiu-jitsu moves, like it wasn't out there. You had to search high and low for it. And so not everybody had access to that. So there was a lot of, if you think about it in theory, a lot of competition that just could have gotten eliminated by the inability to keep up. But now everybody has the ability to keep up. So it's going to, in my opinion, make the creme de la creme really rise to the top.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And for the people that put in the time to study something, to understand how a system works, it doesn't matter if it's the systems that I'm most familiar with of say real estate, stock markets. Stock market's the easy one that's relatable to people, that they can have a comprehension of what that is, or systems like BJJ or MMA. For the people that spend the time, that you learn from the best instructors. I think of the amount of content that's out there in either of those areas, and if you spend the time and you're one of the few people on earth that really understands how those systems work holistically, you have very few competitors. You have very few competition in life in any of those spaces, and probably numerous other spaces that are not my expertise or yours, but that's probably equally true. Meanwhile, you got a subset of society that they want to play video games, or they use that same access to information as a source of entertainment, and it's probably more than 50% of the population. It's Absolutely. Most people, instead of utilizing the unimaginable amounts of knowledge and wisdom that are available to for almost no money, for free or close to free, they want to play a video game instead, or other forms of entertainment or buffoonery.
Well, we talked earlier about living in balance, right? And people having of that opinion of living in balance, and to kind of build off of what you said earlier about, it's like, in order to be highly successful, it's something we talked about, not living like you're living out of balance because you have to dedicate so much time to it. And this is what I talk to people about that want to, for example, sit down and play a video game. If that's your thing, then play a video game, but commit yourself to it at a level where you can actually make money off of that, because there are people that's what they do professionally, and they make really good money. They actually make better money than I made, like playing a video game where they're fighting people rather than actually fighting people. And so, but that's the problem, is that you have this, you talk about over 50% of the population satiating themselves with, I'll use the word nonsensical stuff, but it's like, whether you're sitting and watching television and you're addicted to half a dozen different TV shows, or you like playing video games, but you're all over the place and dedicating and devoting this time in chunks to things that will not build upon one another or mount up to anything at any point in time. And it just becomes this waste. So it's like, if you love video games, then play video games until you can make money doing it. If you like watching TV, well, learn how to, analyze and critique a show so that you can become a critic of film or something. Like whatever that passion is, take it to a level where you can actually monetize it.
I always make fun of critics. I think that a critic is somebody with so lacking talent, that just.
But they get paid.
Very few. The top of anything, like you said, the top couple of video game players in the world make some money. I guess Siskel and Ebert, if anybody else is old enough to remember who they are.
I don't even know any other movie critics.
They probably made some money.
Yeah.
But, critics in general. A guy asked me, a guy's a building manager, and he's got, hundreds of units, several hundred units he's managing. He doesn't own the stuff, he's a manager. And we were having a conversation. I asked him to help me with a couple of things for a project that I had in that building, and he's cooperative enough. And he's like, what can we do better? What can I do better here? And I said, you're managing, 8-figure budget, annual budget. You're managing an eight-figure budget in a premier building in the world. And, it's real easy to criticize with a project that big. You can nitpick something, you can criticize something. And I asked him, of the people who prefer to criticize you, if you ask a question like that, and they say, well, you need to do this, so how many of them could do a better job than you're already doing? And how many really could do a better job than you are? He was so happy about that, I'm just hesitant to criticize anybody who's doing good at something already. It's real easy to point out, anybody can be better. But, with the type of person that has that personality where they want to poke you and say, Rich, you still kept in good shape, Rich, as if that's not enough. So why aren't you still fighting, Rich? Whatever other nonsense they'd add on top of that on the bed. Why aren't you still fighting, Rich? You're still in good shape. Why aren't you beating up the guys in their 20s, Rich?
I've had so many like those Monday morning quarterbacks that guys on social media that'll post about a fight that I lost, and I'll say what you should have done was, and then they start giving their advice, right? And then to which my response is like, no, you're missing the point here. Clearly, what I should have done is hired you as my coach.
Yeah.
And that's where I made my mistake.
That would have made all the difference, no doubt.
Yeah.
You ever meet a hater doing better than you? Say it differently. You ever been hated on by somebody who was doing better than you?
Yeah.
You think they were criticizing?
I'm actually, my gut reaction is no, and I believe that is the correct answer. But I'm sitting here I pause for a second trying to think the answer still is I'm like, let me give this some thought for a second. No, absolutely not.
Yeah. I've thought about that too. The type of criticisms that somebody gives me, I have a few million social media followers, and it's real easy for somebody, same thing you have, somebody in the distance say, you should do this or that. Or, I'll talk about one of my clients had a great success, something, and we'll share that. And then say, Derek, you're fat. That was your takeaway.
Yeah.
This is a good thing I'm a diet coach. He said, you make a couple $1 million in the stock market. A few days I've been, make $2.5 million in a day. I said, Derek, you're fat.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, you find that the people that are doing better than you, when they give feedback, it's constructive, not destructive.
When you won
Hold on a second, but you're not fat though. That's
I could lose another 20 something, high 20s. If I lost 30 pounds, I'd be pretty lean. But I could lose another 20 something pounds of fat, and I'll accept that. That's fine. But I lost 30 pounds already. I lost 30 pounds of fat, gained about 10 pounds of muscle. I cared enough about it. You see in the facilities I got here that I spent about $3 million on real estate and equipment to have my own training facilities, my own, pretty damn high quality gym, etc. So it was something I took seriously enough that I invested some time and money into building facilities and bringing in world-class coaches and spending the time doing it. This is a hobby. It's not my main priority. I don't get paid to, as handsome as I am, I don't get paid to be a model. I know that'll be shocking to you.
But have you ever given thought to the fact that maybe if you pursued that as a life goal, that you can make better money doing that than you are what you're doing currently?
It's hard to beat the stock market.
Well, you're a good-looking guy, though. I'm just saying.
They put me in Playboy. I've been in Playboy. I've been in Maxim. I've been in FHM. But,
I think I've been in FHM and Maxim, but not Playboy.
Yeah, well, hey. I could give you some diet tips that you follow my diet for a while, maybe they'll put you in Playboy too.
Yeah.
Or just do what you've been doing. Seems like it's been working pretty good for you.
It's all right. Yeah.
I think that I've had this thought several times that, when somebody makes a nasty comment, most of them you just ignore, you don't think of it all. But once in a while there's a creative one that rattles around in your head a little bit. I think about that and I'm like, well, what's going on in that person's life it's motivating them to do that. I don't really have time. I got my schedule full with other things. I don't have a lot of time to go be angry with strangers on the internet. It's not a hobby of mine. And I suspect, maybe you won your title fights before the advent of the Instagram wasn't as prolific at that time, or non-existent.
I was right after the MySpace era, and then Facebook was created, but it hadn't really started taking off yet. And of course, now Facebook is an old man's product, according to the.
After Herb Dean or somebody raises your hand in the ring, and did you ever think to yourself while you were there, getting Dana's putting the belt around your waist, think, man, I can't wait to go home on MySpace and talk some shit about some people that I don't even know.
Exactly.
Did you have that thought ever?
No, not one time. Not one time.
I came to the conclusion, I think the number one thing a hater hates is themselves.
Okay, for sure. This is what I tell people all the time. Jesus was perfect. He only had 12 friends, and there was a hater amongst the group, right? And so if he was a perfect man, then something had to be wrong with Judas himself. Jokingly say that as an example, but that's the case. I actually talked about haters. I talk about that quite a bit, and I was just people ask me how I deal with haters. I put a post on my social media about this. I'm like they said haters, doubters, and naysayers, and they kind of clumped that together. I'm like, no, these are three distinctly different groups of people, and the haters category is one in which these are people that are dissatisfied with their own inadequacy of life, and so anytime I've ever had haters, it's like I'm like, you deal with yourself. Now, I will say this, and this is the other thing you got to be mindful of, is that there are people that just like to troll on the internet for the sake of I know people that make money trolling. That's what they do. It's trolling people. And so to them, I actually met one of my trolls one time, and when we met, he was like, this guy get introduced to me, and then after we got introduced, he's like, hey, I just want you to know, he's like, on social media, this is my handle. And I'm like, you're that guy? And he's like, yeah. He goes, but he said, I just want you to know, it's what I do for a living. It's not personal against you. And I'm like, well, actually, I laugh at half your stuff anyway, but that's.
How does a person like this get paid for that? I never knew this was the thing, that they make money doing this.
Because for example, I recently tried the carnivore diet. I had Dr. Sean Baker on my podcast, who wrote the book, The Carnivore Diet.
He's been here with me, literally on the couch.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, and we had awesome conversation. So I tried the carnivore diet strict for 30 days, which technically I'm carnivore anyway. When we had this conversation, where I would say about 70% of my calories come from animal product for the most part anyway, maybe a little less than that, but a bulk of them. And so, but anyway, so I committed to this. I was eating only beef for 30 days straight, and actually I started implementing some fruit because I needed it for my workouts, but it was just beef and fruit. So Dr. Baker, have you seen his socials, what he does on his socials?
No, we watch each other on Instagram.
Yeah, he trolls vegans.
Yeah. Oh, right? Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, what? I said, what is it with, because after I talked to him, I was like, this doesn't seem like your personality to hate on people. And he said, look, I would love to on social media just post research studies and results and numbers and data that actually supports what I'm trying to say here. He said, but people don't care about that. He said, but you make a funny video trolling a vegan and it gets a laugh out of people. So that's why he's like, that's why I do it, simply for social media, for the reaction.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I like to make fun of losers on social media. I say, success is not for everyone, and it may not be for you. But if it is, if you'd like to learn more about this or that.
You watch this video all the way through, and that tells me you're dedicated to learning more and earning far above average outcomes in your life. Congratulations for that. But now it's time to take action. If you could have earned those results by yourself, you would have done it already. My head coach has opened up a few spots on his high-demand calendar for an in-person, one-on-one strategy session to help you. On this call, we'll give you the pragmatic advice that you can implement tonight to get laser-focused on the right metrics and leave mediocrity far behind in your past. Click that link right now in the description below and apply for your call immediately. Do it now.